The bundle of Naira notes hit the marble floor with a soft, deliberate slap. 40 guests turned at once. And in the middle of that ballroom in Ikoyi, under 3 chandeliers and the cold blue flash of 40 raised phones, a woman in a grey housekeeper's uniform stood very still, and she did not look down at the money. "Pick it up," Funky said. The smile she wore was one she had rehearsed. "Pick it up and dance for us. 3 million Naira, every note. All you have to do is entertain my guests for one song." The woman's name was Amara. She had mopped that same floor at 5:40 that morning. Before the sun came over the compound wall, before anyone else in the house was awake. She had scrubbed a spot near the 3rd pillar where a wine glass had shattered the night before. Her knuckles still smelled faintly of vinegar. She did not move. Somewhere at the back of the room, a violinist raised his bow and then lowered it, not sure if he was expected to play or to leave. 2 guests laughed. 1 did not. A phone camera zoomed slowly in on Amara's face, waiting for the collapse took the shame. The small, quiet breaking of a poor woman in front of a rich one, in front of a crowd trained to enjoy it. None of that happened. What happened instead, in the next 4 minutes and 11 seconds, would end an engagement, ruin a family name, and put the woman in the grey uniform on the front page of a newspaper her mother used to line the kitchen bin with. But we are not there yet. Before we go back, a small favor from me to you. If you believe quiet dignity should outlast loud cruelty, tap the subscribe button and turn on the little bell so the next story like this doesn't get buried on you. And down there in the comments, tell me the name of your city and the time on your clock right now. Lagos, Nairobi, London, Houston, Manila, Ho Chi Minh, wherever you are tonight. I read every one of them, and I like knowing which corner of the world is listening. Now, let me take you back 3 years, to the morning Amara Okafor first walked through the gates of the Adebayo estate. The estate sat behind a wall the color of dried bone on Bordeaux Road, in the part of Ikoyi where the houses have 3 names. The family name, the street name, and a private name. The servants use because saying it wrong is a firing offense. The Adebayo house had all 3. The family called it the estate. The street knew it as the White House. The staff called it, quietly and only among themselves, the mausoleum, because half the rooms were kept sealed and dust-covered for reasons no one who lived there could remember. Amara Okafor stood at the gate on a Tuesday in July, 3 years ago, wearing a navy blouse she had ironed twice because the first time she was thinking of her mother and had left a scorch line near the collar. She was 27 years old. She was carrying a plastic bag with 2 changes of clothes, a small Bible, and a hairnet still in its packaging. She had left Ajagunle at 4 in the morning to catch the second Danfo from Iyana Iba and had crossed the entire city of Lagos to arrive here, at this gate, at this house, for a job interview that lasted 45 seconds. The interview was conducted by a woman named Mama Bisi Okoro, who had run the Adebayo domestic staff for 19 years and could measure a young woman's whole life by how she held her hands during introduction. Amara's hands did not fidget. They also did not lie flat. They rested on the plastic bag as if the bag were a small, living thing she was responsible for. "You have done this work before?" Mama Bisi asked, in Yoruba first and then in English, watching for how Amara's face responded to the switch. "I have not, Ma," Amara said, in English. "But I have kept a house, my mother's, for almost 8 years." "Your mother is unwell?" Amara's mouth did a small thing then, a tightening and a release. "Yes, Ma. She had a stroke on February the 14th, 2 years ago." Mama Bisi nodded once, slowly. She did not ask the follow-up question that most employers ask. "How much do you need to send home?" How much of your salary is not really yours? Do you have children of your own? Because she had already seen the answer in the plastic bag with 2 changes of clothes and a Bible. You start on Thursday, she said. You will sleep in the room above the garage. It is small. The bed is not new. The window faces east, so the sun will wake you. Do you have a problem with the sun waking you? No, Ma. Good, said Mama Bisi. In this house, the sun is the only alarm clock that has never been late. That was how Amara came to work for the Adebayos. The room above the garage was, as promised, small. A single bed with a mattress that sagged towards the middle. A wooden chest of drawers with a mirror on top that had a crack running through the left corner like a river on a map. A window facing east. A ceiling fan that made a soft ticking sound at speed 3 and a louder ticking sound at speed 4. Amara moved in on the Wednesday night, unpacked her plastic bag in 90 seconds, and sat on the edge of the mattress for a long time in the dark, listening to the fan. She did not cry. She had made a decision on the Danfo from Iana Iba, somewhere between Berger and Third Mainland Bridge, that she was not going to cry for anything that was already decided. Crying, she had learned, was for the things you could still change. The next morning at 5:40, Amara was already in the kitchen. Mama Bisi noted the time in the small notebook she kept in her apron pocket and did not say a word about it, which was, in Mama Bisi's language, the highest form of compliment. The house had a rhythm to it. The ogre of the house, Mr. Tunde Adebayo, CEO of Adebayo Holdings, 42 years old and rarely at home, kept his schedule on a fridge magnet that only Mama Bisi was allowed to update. The magnet said things like Singapore, 6 days, and Lagos, meetings only. In the 3 months after Amara arrived, Tunde Adebayo was in the estate for a total of 11 days. Amara saw him exactly once in the hallway near the library, where he nodded at her without seeing her, and once through the kitchen window, where he sat alone at the pool at 11 at night, drinking water and looking at his phone. She thought both times the same thing. Rich men look tired, the same way poor men look tired, just in better shirts. Life in the estate settled. Amara mopped the marble in the ballroom every morning before 6. She dusted the bookshelves in the library on Mondays and Thursdays. She learned that Mr. Adebayo's mother's photograph in the main sitting room needed to be turned slightly to the left every 3 days because the housekeeper before Amara had turned it slightly to the right every 3 days, and no one had ever corrected her. She learned that Mama Bisi cried quietly on the anniversary of her son's death, which was August the 9th, and that on that day Mama Bisi wanted to be left alone in the pantry from 3 to 4 in the afternoon and did not want questions afterwards. Amara kept 2 things private. The first was her mother. Mrs. Ankoli Okafor lived in Ajgunle, in a 2-room flat above a barber's shop, in a bed she had not left properly since the morning of Valentine's Day 2 years ago. She could speak a little. Her left hand worked. Her right hand did not. She was cared for during the day by Amara's aunt Chinwe, who was old and kind, and could not be paid what she was worth. Amara sent home 60,000 naira from her salary every month, kept 25,000 for herself. The rest went to medical. The stroke had left a debt of 4 million, 700,000 naira at the private hospital in Surulere. And although Amara had negotiated it down to a monthly installment plan, the mathematics of paying it off on a housekeeper's salary was the kind of mathematics you did not check because the answer would make you sit down on the floor. The second private thing was the bar. Along the east wall of Amara's small room, at the height of her hip, she had screwed a length of smooth polished dowel into the wall using 2 brackets she had bought at Balogun Market for 1,200 naira. It looked, to anyone glancing in, like a decorative rail for hanging scarves. It was, in fact, a ballet bar. Every night after her shift ended and Mama Bisi had gone home to her own daughter in Ilupeju, Amara closed her door, turned off the ceiling fan so its clicking would not distract her, and worked at the bar for 1 hour. Pliés in first, second, and fifth position. 10 douce. Rond de jambe, adagio at the bar. She worked with the discipline of somebody who had, at 19, been the best in her cohort at the National Troupe of Nigeria Academy in Abuja, and who had left 3 months before graduation because her mother had collapsed on the kitchen floor and there was no one else to go home to. She did not dance for anyone. She did not dance for pleasure. She danced because a body that has been trained for 6,000 hours by the age of 22 does not forget how to move. And if you stop moving, the body starts to grieve, and the grief is loud even in a small room. So she moved, quietly, in the dark, above a garage in Ikoyi, for no one at all. For 2 years and 11 months, no one in the Adebayo estate knew. Then, on the evening of the 3rd of April, a woman named Funk Balagun came to live in the house full time, and the mathematics of Amara's life changed in a way no one had prepared her for. Funke Balagun was 34 years old. She was, by any measure that matters in the society pages of this day, and Bellanaja, a considerable catch. Her father was a former minister of state. Her mother sat on the board of 2 banks. She had been educated at Cheltenham Ladies' College in England, then at the Rambert School of Ballet in London. She had trained there from 2010 to 2012 as a scholarship student until the school director had sat her down at the end of her 2nd year and said, kindly, but without ambiguity, that the Royal Ballet's professional stream was not going to be the path for her, and that she should consider directing her considerable intelligence towards fields where she would not be measured against people who could turn better than her. She had returned to Lagos, married a banker at 26, divorced him at 30 for reasons the papers described as irreconcilable temperament, and was now engaged to Mr. Tunde Adebayo, whose wealth was, in the polite phrasing of society, generational. The engagement had been announced in October. The wedding was set for the 15th of December. She moved into the estate on the 3rd of April. She met Amara in the corridor outside the library at 11:10 on her first morning. Amara was carrying a tray of dusting cloths. Funke was carrying nothing except a phone, and the expression of a woman who has never in her life had to open a door for herself. She stopped in the middle of the corridor. She looked at Amara from her hairnet down to her shoes. She looked at her for 4 full seconds without speaking, which is a very long time to be looked at in silence in a corridor. Then she said, Said, isn't it? Amara, ma. Amara, Funke repeated, as if trying the word on and finding it did not fit. Yes, Amara, I'll try to remember. She did not try to remember. For the first 6 weeks, she called Amara Sade in the mornings, Bola in the afternoons, and on one particularly bright evening when a friend was over for gin and tonics, the one who mops. Amara answered to all of them. Mama Bisi noticed. Mama Bisi did not say anything, because Mama Bisi had also been called by wrong names for 19 years, and had decided at some point that the correct response to being renamed was to keep the name your mother gave you alive in your own head, and let the other names die when nobody was using them. The cruelty escalated the way water rises in a leaking basement. Slowly, silently, in ways that were only noticeable when your feet were already cold. Week 2. Funke asked Amara to iron a silk kimono, then complained that the crease was in the wrong place, and demanded that Amara stand in the corner of the dressing room for 20 minutes to think about attention to detail. Amara stood in the corner for 20 minutes. She thought about nothing in particular. Mostly she thought about her mother's morning medication schedule, and whether Aunt Chinwei had remembered to give the amlodipine before the metformin, because giving them in the wrong order made her mother nauseous. Week 5. Funke deliberately spilled a glass of red wine on the ballroom floor at midnight, just before she went to bed, so that when Amara arrived at 5:40 the next morning, she would have to scrub it with vinegar before the stain set. Amara scrubbed it out in 35 minutes. Her knuckles smelled of vinegar for the rest of the day. She did not mention it. Week 8. At a small dinner party for 3 of Funke's friends, Funke turned to one of them mid-conversation, gestured with her chin at Amara, and said, loudly enough that Amara could hear from the sideboard where she was refilling water. You people from the mainland, you carry the smell of generator smoke like perfume. Even after 2 showers, it doesn't leave. It's the diet. Too much palm oil, too much suffering. It gets into the skin. The 3 friends laughed. 2 of them looked at their plates. One of them, a woman named Ronke Ibe, looked at Amara for a moment and did not laugh, and Amara, without ever meeting her eye, understood that she had one witness in this house who was not Mama Bisi. Week 11. Funke fired the gardener, a young man from Ibadan called Sola, because he had watered her hibiscus at the wrong time of day, and, when she had shouted at him about it, had said, "Sorry, Ma," without kneeling. Funke told Mama Bisi she wanted him replaced by someone who understands his level. Week 15. Funke walked into Amara's room above the garage. This was a violation. The staff quarters were, by long tradition in Nigerian domestic households, private in a way even the master of the house respected. Mr. Tunde Adebayo had, in 3 years, never once climbed the stairs above the garage. Mama Bisi kept a copy of the key and used it only for maintenance emergencies. Funke had asked Mama Bisi for the key, been refused, taken it from the pantry without permission, and walked in on a Sunday afternoon while Amara was at her aunt's flat in Ajegunle visiting her mother. Funke looked around the small room for a long time. She saw the sagging bed. She saw the cracked mirror. She saw, along the east wall, the smooth, polished dowel screwed into the brackets. She did not know what it was. She thought it was a scarf rail. She left the room, unimpressed, and returned to the main house. Amara came back that evening, changed out of her going-out clothes into her uniform, and knew immediately that someone had been in the room. She did not know how she knew. Something about the position of the mirror, perhaps, or the fact that the drawer with her savings envelope was closed a millimeter too tight, in the way a drawer is closed, by someone who is being careful not to be noticed, rather than by someone who lives there. She checked the envelope. The money was untouched. She sat on the bed for a moment. Then she stood, closed the door, and worked at the bar for an hour and 45 minutes instead of her usual one. She worked pliés until her thighs shook. She worked adagio combinations until her breath was thin. She did not think about Funke. She thought about the woman she had been at 19 San, the girl in a black leotard at the Abuja Academy, who had won the 3rd-year Adagio prize with a variation from Giselle, and who had believed, on the day of the prize-giving, that her life was moving on rails towards a stage in a real theatre. Then she thought about her mother in the flat in Ajegunle, and about the fact that a life on rails is a beautiful thing until the rails end. She went to bed at 11. She was up at 5:40 the next morning. Meanwhile, in a study on the 2nd floor of the main house, Mr. Tunde Adebayo sat at his desk with a barrister named Ademola Coker and a manila folder of amended prenuptial documents. Barrister Coker was a careful man. He had been the Adebayo family's legal counsel for 13 years. He had drawn up prenuptial agreements before, and he knew that the interesting clauses were never the financial ones was standard, but the ones people added at the last minute, in their own handwriting, on the second draft. Tunde had added 3 clauses to the second draft. Coca had noticed all 3. He mentioned none of them out loud. 2 of the 3 related to conduct. One of them, the third, related specifically to the treatment of household staff. Tunde had signed the second draft on the 11th of June. Funke had not yet been shown it. "You will need to have this conversation with her before the wedding," Coca said carefully. "Ideally before the invitations go out." "I know," Tunde said. "May I ask what has prompted this timing?" "Sir?" Tunde looked out of the study window for a moment, at the garden below, where a new gardener was pruning a hibiscus with the precision of a man who was afraid of losing another job. Tunde had that morning walked past Mama Bisi in the corridor and asked her in Yoruba how the house was. Mama Bisi had said in Yoruba, "The house is well, sir." Then she had paused and added, in the neutral tone she used when she was passing information she was not officially passing, "The new madam is settling in her own way." Mama Bisi had not said anything else. She had not needed to. "Something like that," Tunde said to Coca. "I understand," said Coca, who did. They filed the second draft in the safe. Tunde did not tell Funke about it. He did not tell her, either, that he had known within 6 weeks of moving her into the estate that he had made a mistake, and that the wedding was, in his private mind, already a matter to be resolved rather than a matter to be celebrated. He was, however, a Nigerian man from a certain generation of Adebayos, and men from that generation do not end engagements over feelings. They end engagements over evidence. He was waiting for evidence. The engagement party was scheduled for the 22nd of October at the estate at 7 in the evening for 40 guests. Amara was going to serve at that party. The morning of the 22nd of October began, for Amara, at 5:40, as every morning did. She mopped the ballroom floor. She scrubbed a spot near the third pillar where a wine glass had shattered the night before. Funke had dropped it after her third gin and had left it there for the morning shift to deal with. Amara's knuckles smelled faintly of vinegar. She did not know at 5:40 on the morning of the 22nd of October that by 11:10 that same night, that same spot on the floor would be photographed by 31 different phones and posted to the internet before midnight. The house was in a state of controlled panic all day. Caterers arrived from Victoria Island at 10. A florist from Lekki arrived at 11 with 3 vans of white peonies and 1 van of imported hydrangeas. A string quartet from the University of Lagos Music Department arrived at 3 to rehearse. Funke supervised everything from a chaise longue in the drawing room, wearing sunglasses indoors, sipping cucumber water, and correcting the placement of napkins by pointing at them with a finger and saying no until somebody moved them. At 6 in the evening, Amara went upstairs to her room, washed, changed into the black serving uniform, tied her hair back neatly, and came down at 6:30 to receive her instructions from Mama Bisi. She was assigned to floor service, carrying trays of champagne and small cold canapes, staying near the walls, refilling glasses when they were 3/4 empty. Mama Bisi looked at her briefly and said, in Yoruba, "Stay near the pillars tonight. And whatever happens, remember, you are a witness in this room, not a subject." Amara nodded. She did not fully understand what Mama Bisi meant. She would 4 hours later. The guests began arriving at 7. They came in dark cars with tinted windows, Range Rovers, Mercedes G-Wagons, 1 Rolls-Royce whose driver Amara recognized from a magazine cover. The guests themselves were the usual mixture. 3 business partners from Adebayo Holdings, a state senator, two socialites from the Ikoyi Club, a fashion designer who had once dressed Funke's mother for a wedding in Dubai, and a handful of what Mama Bisi called content people, younger men and women in expensive linen with phones held at eye level, filming the entrance for platforms Mama Bisi did not have on her phone and did not intend to. Tunde arrived at 7:40. He had come straight from a meeting in Victoria Island. He wore a dark grey suit and a plain white shirt, no tie, and shook hands with each guest with the same steady, unhurried grip. He kissed Funke on the cheek once, in a way that a very careful observer might have called correct rather than warm. He spent the first hour of the party at the bar, in conversation with one of his business partners, a man named Chik Ibe, who was in the middle of a story about an oil rig in Rivers State that Tunde was listening to with the exact expression of a man who is politely present but internally elsewhere. Amara moved through the ballroom carrying trays. She did not make eye contact with the guests. This was standard training. Her uniform was clean. Her posture was straight. She was, to most of the room, invisible. She was not, however, invisible to Ronke Ibe, Chaikai's wife, who watched her from the sideboard and remembered the dinner party 3 months ago, and the joke about generator smoke, and the moment Amara had refilled her water without comment, when everyone else at the table had been laughing. By 9, Funke was drunk. Not visibly at first, she was a practiced woman, and her heels had not yet begun to betray her, but her voice had climbed half an octave, and the string quartet, which had been playing quietly through dinner, was now competing with her for airspace and losing. She held court in the center of the room, telling a story about a summer in Positano that everyone had heard before, and the guests laughed in the correct places, because that was the price of admission. At 9:15, she looked across the room and saw Amara refilling a champagne flute for the state senator's wife. Something in Funke's face shifted. Not a shift you could describe. It was the shift that comes over the face of a certain kind of person when they see somebody working quietly and correctly and find, in the sight of it, a small, unaccountable itch of resentment. She turned back to her guests. She waited a beat. Then she said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have an idea." The room, obediently, hushed. "Tonight is a celebration," Funke said. Her voice carried. "And I think we've had enough of standing about. Let's have a little entertainment. Something spontaneous. A murmur. A few phones lifted. "There is," Funke said, "in this room tonight, someone who has served us all evening without complaint. Someone we haven't really seen. And I think that's a shame, because tonight I want everyone to be seen." So, she reached into her small silver clutch bag. She pulled out a bundle of Naira notes, thick and neat, held together with a silver clip. 3 million Naira. Cash. For anyone brave enough to dance for us right now. One song. That is all. She fanned the notes. She smiled. Her eyes traveled slowly across the room until they landed on Amara, who was standing near the third pillar with an empty tray in her hands. "Amara," Funke said. And this was the first time in 6 months she had called her by her actual name. "Amara, what do you say? Would you like to earn this?" The room did the thing rooms do when something wrong is happening, but nobody is willing to be the first to say so. It went silent, but not still. Phones lifted higher. The state senator's wife looked at her plate. Ronke Ibe put down her glass slowly and did not pick it up again. Chike Ibe, mid-sentence with Tunde, stopped speaking, and Tunde looked up from his drink, for the first time in an hour, and turned his head towards the center of the room. Amara set her tray on the sideboard. She looked at Funke. She looked at the notes. She looked briefly at the third pillar where she had scrubbed the wine stain that morning. Then she looked, past all of them at Mama Bisi, who was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, with her hands folded in front of her apron. Mama Bisi did not move. Mama Bisi held Amara's gaze for one long second, and in that second she said with her face, very clearly, "You are a witness in this room, not a subject." Amara turned back to Funke. "I will dance," she said, "but I do not want your money." A murmur ran through the room. Funke's smile did not move, but a small muscle in her jaw did. "How noble," she said. "How noble of you. But the money stays where it is. Otherwise, what's the point of the game?" "There is no game, Ma," Amara said. Her voice was quiet, level, the voice of a woman who had already made a private decision. "I will dance, that is all." She turned to the quartet. "Please play the Adagio for Strings, by Samuel Barber. I know it is not what you rehearsed. If you do not know it, play the second movement of anything slow." The lead violinist blinked. He was a young man of 23 from Bariga, a music student. He looked at his three colleagues. He looked back at Amara. He said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "We know the barber." Amara nodded. She walked to the center of the ballroom floor. She walked past Funke, past the notes on the floor, past the state senator, past Ronke Ibe. She stopped in the space where the light from the three chandeliers converged. She turned to face the far wall. She took off her serving apron, folded it once, and set it neatly on the arm of a nearby chair. Underneath, she wore the plain black uniform trousers and blouse of the household staff. She stood in fifth position, her feet, turning out with a precision so automatic that two of the guests who had trained in ballet, as girls recognized the placement instantly, and one of them, sitting on a low couch, quietly said, "Oh." She raised her arms into a preparatory porte de bras. The quartet began. The Adagio for Strings opens with a single long note in the violins, held, sustained. A note that does not begin so much as continue. As if the sound had been there the whole evening, and everyone had only just noticed it. Amara began to move on that first note, not with a large gesture, with her breath, and then with her hands, and then, slowly, with a step onto the ball of her right foot, into an arabesque that unfolded not from the shoulder, but from the base of the spine. The room understood in the first 8 bars. It was not the understanding of experts. Most of the people in that ballroom did not know what a Vaganova line was, or why the placement of the head at the top of an attitude devant matters, or why the transition from adagio to the small preparatory step for a fouette sequence should be almost invisible if the training has been correct. They understood instead the way a person in a market understands when someone has been carrying water on their head since they were a child. The way the neck sits, the way the shoulders release, the way the body does with grace what other bodies do with effort. Amara was not performing. She was doing what her body had been trained to do for 6,000 hours before she was 22, and what she had continued to do in a small room above a garage for 6,000 hours more since. She turned, she extended, she held. Funke, who had trained at the Rambert School of Ballet in London from 2010 to 2012, and had been told, gently, that she was not going to be a professional, saw the third combination and knew exactly what she was looking at. She knew the Vaganova preparation. She knew the point of the foot. She knew, in a way that hit her below the sternum, that the woman she had been calling Sade for 6 months was the kind of dancer that Funke, at 19, had cried in her dormitory in London for not being able to become. Her smile faltered. She lowered her arms. She began, without knowing it, to step backwards. The music climbed. The adagio does not so much build as swell, it rises in slow arcs. And each arc is higher than the last, and each demands more of the dancer's stamina, and Amara met each rise. Her arms carried the music, Her back carried her whole life. She did a slow attitude derriere. She did a controlled développé to second, extending her leg to the height of her ear, and held it, and lowered it, as slowly as a woman, lowering a sleeping baby back into a cot. Somewhere in the back of the room, Ronka-Ibe was crying. Silently. Not the theatrical crying of society women at a wedding. The kind of crying you do when you realize, in the middle of an ordinary evening, that you have been complicit in something small and cruel that you did not have the courage to name at the time. Chik-Ibe raised his phone. Not to mock, to record. He did not know at that moment why he was recording. He would understand 3 days later, when he sat with his laptop at 3 in the morning and posted the clip to LinkedIn under the caption, "This is what we owe the people who serve us." The music entered its final climb. Amara turned into a slow, sustained pirouette, not the flashy multiple turn of a competition dancer. A single, held, controlled rotation, arms opening, breath even. The pivot foot rooted, the free foot in the exact place. Her old teacher at the Abuja Academy, Professor Ekene Ivu, had drilled into her 1,000 times. Sur le coup de pied, not too high, not too low. The ankle bone visible. She landed the turn, she held. The adagio at its final bar does not end. It fades. The strings dissolve into a long, slow diminuendo, a sound the ear does not want to release. Amara held her final position. One arm extended, the other folded at her heart, her head slightly tilted, her weight resting on the ball of her right foot. For the last 4 counts of the fade. And then, as the last note vanished, she brought her feet together, folded her arms into a small closing bow, and stood, breathing, in the exact center of the ballroom. 4 minutes and 11 seconds after she had begun. The room did not applaud. The room did not know how. And that was the moment Tunde Adebayo, who had been standing near the bar with a glass of water in his hand for the entire duration of the piece, and had not moved once, set the glass down on the nearest surface, walked slowly across the ballroom, and stopped 6 feet away from Amara. He said her name, Amara Okafor. She looked up. She did not know how he knew her surname. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, quietly, "I signed a scholarship for a young woman by that name. Application number 2019-047. Full fellowship. The National Troupe of Nigeria Academy in Abuja." She did not take up her final year. Amara's mouth opened, then closed. "That was me, sir," she said. Tunde nodded, slowly. Then he turned towards Funke. Then he turned back to Amara. Then he said, in a voice that carried across the entire silent room, "I owe you an apology, and I owe every person in this room an explanation. Please, if you will, give me 1 moment." Tunde did not raise his voice. He did not need to. When a man of his kind of quiet stands in the center of a room he owns and speaks, the room recalibrates around the sound. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he said. He looked at the state senator. He looked at Chik-Ibe. He looked at each of the 3 business partners in turn. "This engagement party is now over. The catering staff will bring your coats. Drivers have been called. Please travel safely. There is no cause for alarm. There has, however, been a serious lapse in the conduct of this house tonight, and I do not intend to correct it in front of you. Good night." The room began to move. Slowly, then quickly. The socialites gathered their clutches. The state senator gathered his wife. Chik-Ibe put a hand on his wife's back and steered her towards the door. He glanced once at Tunde. Tunde inclined his head very slightly. Nothing more was needed. Chike understood. Within 11 minutes, the ballroom was empty of guests. The staff remained. So did Funke, who had not moved from where she was standing at the edge of the room, near the empty chair where Amara had folded her apron. Mama Bisi came forward. She did not speak. She simply walked over to Amara, put a hand on the small of her back, and steered her towards the kitchen. Amara went. She left the folded apron on the chair. She did not look at Fiancée. She did not look at Tunde. She walked out of the ballroom with the same steadiness she had walked in with, and the moment she was through the kitchen door, Mama Bisi closed it behind them and said, in Yoruba, "Sit down, my daughter. Drink water. The night is not finished yet, but for you it is." Amara sat down at the kitchen table. Her hands were shaking. She had not noticed until she tried to lift the glass. In the ballroom, Tunde and Fiancée were alone. Fiancée recovered first. She always did. She was the daughter of a former minister, and she had been raised to believe that the correct response to a difficult moment was to take control of the narrative before the other person could. "Tunde," she said, "before you say anything that was inappropriate of me, I admit it. I had too much to drink. The girl is talented. I did not know. I will apologize to her tomorrow. In writing, if you want." Tunde looked at her for a long time. "Funk," he said. "In 3 months, you have called that woman by the wrong name 411 times. Mama Bisi has been counting. She keeps a small notebook. She showed it to me last week." Funke's face did not move, but a small color rose in her neck. "You spilled a glass of wine on the ballroom floor at midnight on the 11th of July, so that she would have to clean it at 5 in the morning. You entered her private room without permission on the 14th of July. You made a remark about generator smoke in front of 3 guests, which was reported back to me by 2 of them, independently. You dismissed a gardener because he did not kneel when he apologized. And tonight, you offered a woman who works in my house 3 million naira to entertain your friends. In my ballroom, in front of 40 people, with phones raised." He paused. "I have known about all of this," he said, "for some time. I have been waiting to see whether it would stop of its own accord. It did not." Funke's mouth moved. She did not speak. Tunde walked to the sideboard. He opened the small locked cabinet where he kept the household documents. He took out a manila folder. He set it on the sideboard. "This is the second draft of our prenuptial agreement," he said. "It was completed by Barrister Ademola Coker on the 11th of June. It contains 3 clauses that are not standard. One of them concerns the treatment of household staff. Specifically, it stipulates that any documented pattern of abusive conduct towards persons in domestic service, by either party, before or during the marriage, is grounds for the immediate termination of the engagement, or, after the marriage, the initiation of divorce proceedings on the terms specified in Section 11. He tapped the folder. "You have never seen this draft. That was my fault. I should have shown it to you in June. I wanted, I think, to give you a chance to demonstrate that the clause would not be necessary. You have demonstrated the opposite." Funke found her voice. "You are ending our engagement," she said. "Because I was rude to a maid." "No," Tunde said. "I am ending our engagement because I am marrying the person you are, not the person you present in company. And the person you are treats human beings like set dressing when she believes no one important is looking. That is not a person I want to raise children with. That is not a person I want in this house. And frankly, Funke, that is not a person I want to grow old sharing a bed with." She stared at him. "You cannot do this," she said. "Not as a threat, as a plea. The invitations have gone out. The papers have printed the date. Do you know what my mother will say? I have already called your mother," Tunde said. "This afternoon, I told her I was concerned. She told me that in her opinion I was overreacting. That was the last conversation I intend to have with your family on this subject." Funke's face did something complicated. Anger. First. Then something colder. Then something smaller and older that Tunde had never seen on it before, which was fear. Where am I supposed to go tonight? She said. Your car is at the front gate, said Tunde. Your driver has been informed. Your things will be sent to your parents' house on Bordeyon Road tomorrow, packed by the staff with a full inventory. I will not permit anyone to take anything of yours or lose anything of yours. That is a promise. He looked at her for a long moment. I am sorry, Funke, he said. I do not enjoy this. I am not doing it to punish you. I am doing it because there is no version of this marriage that ends well for either of us. You will understand that in time. Not tonight, but in time. Funke did not cry. She was, as I have said, a practiced woman. She picked up her clutch bag from the sideboard. She did not pick up the 3 million naira. She walked out of the ballroom with her heels, striking the marble in the same rhythm she had walked in with 6 months ago, and the front doors of the estate closed behind her at 11:24 that night. The money stayed on the floor until morning. At 6 the next morning, Mama Bisi counted it, banded it, and locked it in the household safe. Nobody touched it after that for 8 days. Amara slept in her small room above the garage that night with the door locked. She did not practice at the bar. She lay on her back, on the sagging mattress, and looked at the ceiling fan, which she had left off, and she listened to the compound outside settling into silence. She did not know what she was supposed to feel. She thought mostly of her mother. She thought, we have almost paid off the hospital. 2 more years of installments. 2 more years, and we will be free of Surulere General. She did not know that at the same moment, in an apartment in Ikeja, Chike Ibe was sitting at his laptop with his wife Ronke beside him, uploading a 2-minute and 19-second clip of a woman in a black serving uniform performing an adagio for strings on a marble ballroom floor with the caption, "This is what we owe the people who serve us," and 3 lines below, "If anyone knows who this young woman is, please help me find her. She deserves the world." The clip was posted to LinkedIn at 11:52 at night on the 22nd of October. By 4 in the morning, it had 11,000 views. By 9 that morning, it had 140,000. At 9:30 that morning, in an office at the National Troupe of Nigeria Academy in Abuja, Professor Ekene Ivu opened LinkedIn on his phone, which he only did once a week and always reluctantly, and saw the clip on his feed. He watched it once. He watched it a second time. He set the phone down on his desk. He did not move for several minutes. Then he picked up the phone and called the academy's director, a woman named Dr. Halima Bello, who was in her office 2 doors down, and said in a voice he could barely control, "Halima, come and see this. It is Amara Okafor. She is alive. She is dancing. And whoever this is has just posted her to the internet." Dr. Bello came into his office within 90 seconds. She watched the clip. She watched it a second time. She watched it a third. "Where was this filmed?" she asked. "Ikoyi," said Professor Ekane. "The Adebayo estate. The Adebayo of Adebayo Holdings? The same." Dr. Bello sat down slowly. "Ekine," she said, "we lost her 3 months before graduation." "I know," said Professor Ekine. "I remember. She was the best in her cohort." "I remember that too." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Dr. Bello said, "Call her. Today. Find her. Tell her the academy has an audition slot next Monday. Not a scholarship. She will not accept a scholarship. She is not that kind of girl. Tell her it is an open audition. Tell her the panel will not know her name until after she has finished. Tell her we would like her to come." Professor Ekine nodded. He called Adebayo Holdings' main line. He asked for the CEO's assistant. He explained who he was. The assistant, a young woman named Grace, took a message and said, "Precisely. I will pass this to Mr. Adebayo. Please expect a call back within the hour." The callback came in 41 minutes. It was not Tunde. It was Mama Bisi. She had been given the phone by Tunde and told to conduct the conversation herself. She asked Professor Akin 3 questions. What year had Amara studied? What had been her best variation? What was the name of the teacher who had drilled her placement for the sur le coup de pied preparation? Professor Akin answered all 3. Mama Bisi listened. Then she said quietly, "Come to Lagos, Professor. Come and speak to her yourself. I will not put her on the phone. She has had a long night, but you should see her. In person." Professor Akin took the 11 a.m. Air Peace flight from Abuja to Lagos. Amara was told about the meeting at 4 that afternoon. She was told by Mama Bisi in the kitchen, over a cup of Bournvita. Amara sat with the cup in her hands for a long time. She did not drink from it. Mama Bisi did not speak. Mama Bisi had learned, over 19 years, that the correct thing to do when somebody was receiving good news that was arriving 3 years too late was to sit in silence and let them arrive at it on their own time. Finally, Amara said, "Ma, my mother. Your mother will be brought to Lagos this weekend," Mama Bisi said. "Mr. Adebayo has already arranged it. A private ambulance from Ajagunle. A room in a clinic in Ikoyi. 2 months, minimum, to see if her therapy improves with better care. He is paying for it. He does not want to be thanked for it. He has asked me to tell you that specifically. It is not a favor. It is a repair. He will not accept the framing of a favor." Amara set the Bournvita cup down. She did not cry. She had made a decision 3 years ago, on a danfo from Iyana Iba, that she would not cry for anything that was already decided. She looked at Mama Bisi. Mama Bisi looked back at her. Neither of them said anything for a very long time. Then Amara said, "Ma, I would like to go up to my room now." "Go," said Mama Bisi. "The professor is not coming until tomorrow morning at 8. You have tonight." Amara went up the stairs above the garage. She closed the door. She turned off the fan. She stood for a long time at the bar. She did not move. She did not do pliés. She did not do tendus. She rested her hand on the smooth, polished dowel that she had screwed into the wall 3 years ago, with a pair of brackets from Balagun Market. She rested her hand there. She breathed. Then she began to work. The audition on the Monday happened as planned. Amara arrived at the temporary Lagos audition space, a rehearsal room the academy had rented at the Muson Center on Onikan, at 9 in the morning, wearing a plain black leotard and pink tights. She had bought that Saturday at a dance supplier in Surulere with money. Mama Bisi had insisted on advancing her from her own pocket. She had done her hair in a low bun. She had eaten a small breakfast. She had not slept well, but she had slept enough. The panel consisted of 5 people: Dr. Halima Bello, Professor Ekini Iwu, 2 visiting adjudicators from the National Troupe, a visiting instructor from the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theatre who had happened to be in Lagos that week for a workshop and had agreed to sit in as an external ear. Amara did not know their names. She had asked not to know. She was to be introduced only by her audition number, which was 142. She danced 3 pieces. A required classical variation, the Giselle Act 2 solo, a modern piece of her own choreographing, 3 minutes long, set to a Nina Simone recording of Ne Me Quitte Pas, a cold red, sight unseen. The panel showed her a 2-minute choreographic phrase on video and gave her 20 minutes to learn it and perform it. She was in the room for 1 hour and 40 minutes. She was not told the result at the end. That was standard. She thanked the panel. She left the room. She walked out onto Onikan, into the ordinary noise of a Lagos Monday. The danfo horns, the roadside barbers, the woman selling boiled corn from a tray on her head, and she took a bolt back to Ikoyi. And she went to work. The result came on the Thursday, in a plain white envelope, delivered by DHL. She had been accepted. Full fourth-year admission. Class beginning in January. No fees. The academy waived them on the grounds of exceptional readmission, but no scholarship either. She had insisted, through Professor Ekene, that no financial patronage from the Adebayo family be part of the arrangement. Tunde had accepted her condition without argument. He understood it. He respected it. Her mother's condition improved slowly over the 2 months of clinical care in Ikoyi. Not miraculously. There were no miracles. There was, however, physiotherapy of a standard that Ajegunle did not have, and a speech therapist who could give 3 sessions a week instead of 1, and a nurse who could come daily instead of Amara's Aunt Chinwe, who had done her best on a schedule that was cruel to both of them. By the middle of December, Mrs. Nenkoli Okafor could hold a cup of Bornvita in her right hand for the first time in almost 3 years. She held it for 11 seconds before she needed to put it down. Amara, watching, sat very still and did not do the thing she wanted to do, which was to make a sound. Funke Balogun's story ended more quietly than the internet expected. The LinkedIn clip did not, in fact, go viral in the way people mean when they use that phrase. It reached a specific audience, the Nigerian professional class, business leaders, the arts community, and the diaspora. It was viewed 480,000 times over 4 weeks. Chike Ibe removed the caption asking to identify the dancer after Amara privately requested he do so. He did not take down the clip. He was asked by 2 publications for the story behind it and declined to give it. Funke's family did not release a statement. They did not need to. Society knew. Her mother's board seat at the second bank was, 3 months later, not renewed. Her father made no public comment. The wedding invitations were quietly withdrawn by the invitation printer, who was paid the balance of his fee for silence. Funke went to London for 2 months to stay with a cousin. She came back thinner. She spoke to no journalists. 2 things did happen to her. The first, she was formally removed from the board of the Balogun Family Foundation, which her parents controlled and which funded literacy programs for domestic workers in Lagos. Her removal was not announced. It appeared in the following year's annual report in the section listing board changes under the neutral phrasing, position vacated by mutual agreement. The second, she agreed under a private arrangement negotiated between her father and Tunde's family to complete 200 hours of documented service at that same foundation, working directly with the literacy program's participants, housekeepers, cleaners, cooks, nannies, women mostly, women like the ones she had been rude to for the previous 15 years. She did the 200 hours. She kept her mouth shut for most of them. On the last day, according to a supervisor who spoke to no journalist and whose account survived only in a Balogun family email chain, Funke sat down at the end of a Thursday afternoon class and cried for 20 minutes in a locked stall in the ladies' bathroom. What she cried about, if she cried about anything specifically, is not for me to say. I will say only this. A woman named Halima Musa, 49 years old, from Nasarawa State, who had been enrolled in the foundation's literacy program for 11 months, wrote in her final assessment portfolio under the heading, "What I have learned this year," a sentence that was later included, without her name, in the foundation's public annual report. The sentence was, "The rich are afraid of us in a way we did not know before. They are afraid we will one day see them clearly. This year, one of them saw us first, and she cried about it." I do not know if that sentence was written about Funke Balogun. I do not know if Halima Musa ever knew who Funke was. I include the sentence because sometimes the smallest sentence, written by the person you thought was invisible, is the whole story. Tunde Adebayo did not marry anyone else for a long time. He returned to his rhythm. Singapore, 6 days. Lagos, meetings only. He turned his mother's photograph in the sitting room slightly to the left every 3 days himself. After Amara left for Abuja in January, because the new housekeeper turned it to the right, and he preferred to correct it in silence rather than embarrass her. He kept the bar in Amara's old room above the garage, exactly where it was. He said, when Mama Bisi asked if it should be removed, that it should not be removed, that the room should be left as it was, just in case. Mama Bisi asked no follow-up question, because she had learned, over 19 years, when a man was leaving a door open in his own house. Amara went to Abuja on the 7th of January. She danced her final year at the academy. She graduated in the July of the year after that, at the age of 29. She joined the national troupe. She has since then danced principal roles in 3 productions. She has toured once to Cape Town. She sends money home to her mother every month by direct transfer. Aunt Chinwe still visits 3 times a week. Mrs. Nkoli Okafor cannot yet walk, but she can, on good days, use her right hand to write short sentences on a notepad. One of the sentences she wrote, on the first Sunday of last month, and which her sister Chinwe photographed and sent to Amara by WhatsApp, read simply, "My daughter danced." That is where I want to leave this story. Almost. Before I do, because I owe you the honesty of it, I want to say the small thing that I always think about when I tell a story like this one, and which is the reason I tell them at all. I have spent a long time now writing about people who serve in other people's houses. I've read the reports. I've read the numbers. There are, in Nigeria alone, an estimated 1.5 million women and men in domestic service. Most of them are underpaid. A great many of them are unseen. And a percentage of them, nobody knows how large, because nobody has ever bothered to count, are working in those houses, not because they were born to it, but because life bent them off the road they were meant to be on. They were teachers. They were students. They were dancers. They were engineers. They were, before the illness in the family or the failed harvest or the exam fee they could not pay, something else. You may have met one of them and not known. That is the part that stays with me. Not the dramatic moment in the ballroom. The other part. The part where a woman with the training of a principal dancer sweeps your marble floor every morning at 5:40, and you never think to ask her name correctly. The part where the man who washes your car had a place at engineering school in Nsukka that he had to give up in his 2nd year. The part where the woman who takes care of your children could tell you, if you asked, the names of every capital city in Africa in alphabetical order, because she used to be the one at the front of a classroom asking the same question. You do not need to know all of it. You do not need to save them either. That is not what any of this is about. What it is about is much smaller than that. Get the name right. Say it correctly. Say it the 2nd time you say it, and the 3rd, and the 10,000th. Do not raise your voice at somebody who cannot raise theirs back. Do not offer money to somebody in front of a crowd. Do not spill wine at midnight because you know who will scrub it in the morning. That is all. Get the name right. The rest, believe me, tends to take care of itself. Amara Okafor is dancing tonight, somewhere in a rehearsal studio in Abuja that is too hot in July and too cold in December. The bar in the small room above the garage in Ikoyi is still on the east wall, where she screwed it in 3 years, before anyone in that house knew who she was. If you have watched this far, thank you. And if you know an Amara, call her by her name.